Hello, everyone. I am Lisa Anna Palmer, also known as the VP Coach, founder of Light Your Leadership Inc., author of the international best-selling Light a Fire in Their Hearts, and creator of the LYLTalks podcast. Today, we are going to delve deeper into the journey of the role of organizational vice president. And our guest is Darren DeJean, who is a revenue growth expert, sales enablement strategist, momentum maker, transformational leader, and a high-performance team builder. Nowadays, Darren is president and founder of Revigence. Before that, he was a vice president at a renowned organization and came highly recommended to me by my very good friend and collaborator, Magdalene Kuhlman. When I asked her if she knew any awesome current or former vice presidents that I could interview on Little Talks. So thank you, Magdalene.
You.
Darren has over 20 years of experience, and when he began his career journey, it was in business development, selling in high tech to customers through various channels and with partners around the world. He co-founded two companies and learned how hard and exciting it is to take something from concept to conclusion. That led him to focus on building teams and leading them to success. And obviously, he did very well because he came so highly recommended. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. So Darren, take us through your career journey. When did you first realize that you wanted to become a senior leader? And what were some of the major career moves that got you there?
Yeah, that's a good question. My dad owned his own business, so I grew up in a household where your dad was the boss, and I think that was I guess just inherent in me that that's how you grow in life. You're gonna you work and you become a boss somewhere. But it took me a while to get to that level. I spent a lot of my career as an individual contributor, working, as you mentioned, in a couple of high tech startups, very fast growing ones too. So I got to experience, companies going through IPOs and so forth. So I went from an inside salesperson to managing massive territories in a matter of a couple of years. And then from there, I started two of my own companies, and you become instant leaders in that case, and you start learning, the process there through hard knocks. But it was only when I went back into I guess the regular workforce, working for a development bank, and I was again an individual contributor, and a good and a successful one. And some of the VPs that were around me, they wanted to sort of bring me up and to do it. So I started to manage a very small team, and it grew over time. And I think that was like the biggest transformation to me, realizing what you need to do to become a leader. And then, going from, a director in an area to a VP was another big step. But I think, along the way, you want to succeed, you want to make money, and when you see teams around you working, you want to be able to to do to have an impact on them, and to if a lot of employees say, if I was the boss, I would do things differently. Well, if you actually get the shot to do it, then you can actually put it to the test. So I was lucky enough to be put in that position. I had some great VP mentors and coaches around me, and they helped me along the way to really kind of fine tune my skills. So that's how I got into the leadership stream, and then eventually the VP positions.
Interesting. So it was basically you saw people in your workplace who were VPs and you kind of wanted to follow in their footsteps and they helped you by mentoring you and
Yeah, well, you believe in the mission, the organization, and you want to help them achieve the mission. And I think like the best way to do it is managing a team of people to do what you know how to do, and you have that one to many aspect of it. So yeah, it kind of worked out. It worked out well.
Nice. And so you mentioned, you went from director to VP, which is normally what happens, right? Or some people become senior directors or whatnot. But
Right.
tell me more about what does it feel like to jump from director to VP role?
Well, what did it feel like? When I looked at it before I actually took the role and started to, work within it, I thought, well, I'm already doing it now, pretty much. It's just, that level. It was only until you're in the role that you realize it's quite different. And your management skills and all the tools and that you've gained along the way are put to use, but the playing field's a little bit different. The executive team that you're on, the other VPs around you, they're your team now. It's not just you and your direct reports. You have a team, and they all have very different roles and responsibilities, and you have to work together in that environment. And I think that was the big shift, and that was actually empowering in a lot of ways, because the executive team does manage the organization, and you were able to have good impact, and you were able to work with those team members to succeed. And I guess another shift was the actual, the managing. You're managing your teams, you're managing, your coworkers and so forth. You're also managing up a lot more in terms of making sure that the entire organization is tracking the right way and everybody's rowing in the same direction.
Hmm. And so just to kind of paint a picture, because some of the listeners here are aspiring vice presidents, right?
Right.
And you want to give them a snapshot of what it could feel like to step into those roles and how to prepare for it ahead of time, and even go through the self-reflection of, is it really for them? Because of course, like we look at those roles and we think, oh wow. And I remember myself, when I was early in my career, I used to like, oh yeah, I want to be a senior leader for sure. Actually, some of my first words when I was 3 was like me boss. So I know now certainly I've learned that's not the appropriate way now as a 53-year-old, but certainly that idea, right? Now I understand that for you it sounds like maybe it was a little bit smoother, that transition, but some people really find the jump from manager to director is a big one, but
Yeah.
from director to VP is like a huge one. So either something you've experienced yourself or maybe you've observed in others,
Right.
because it does sound like you had mentors. So that's really positive, and it sounds like you had some good relationships, which is not always the case. So if you can maybe give us a little bit more insight into what that new world, once you
Hmm.
open that door to the VP office, what it's like.
Right. Well, my first bit of advice is, don't take the job because of the title.
Mhm.
Look at the roles and responsibilities of the role, and be prepared for that. And I think that's the biggest shift. And I've had the pleasure of managing people who wanted to be manager, who wanted to be a director, who wanted to move up through the ranks, and you have to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, right? That if you have a team, you're working for them, right? You're trying to get the team to meet their goals, and it's a very it's a very different approach. And so if you just want that VP title, that's one thing. In order to survive in that role, I think you need to be able to, as I mentioned, work with the team that is around you, your other VPs and your executives. They're your team, and you're working on a different level in terms of how the organization operates. You're still executing. Everybody's moving to strategy and trying to make the numbers and all that good stuff. And that's the exciting part. But the role itself is different. So take a look at it. Take a look at that. Make sure if you're getting into the role, you look at the organization. You look at who your peers are, who you're reporting to, and who that boss is, and you're going to be working with them very closely. They want you to succeed, and just make sure that they're aligned, the right way.
Mm. And again, thinking about, so I'm glad you're sharing you had sounds like a positive experience with
Oh
your key colleagues, because it's
yeah.
not always the case, right? Sometimes I hear that by the time people get to the vice president position, that colleagues become competition, and so they kind of feel more isolated, more alone when
Mhm.
in those roles. So maybe if you could share some of your secrets to how do you build those relationships horizontally?
Yeah. So For me, I think one of the rules I live by is, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So I'm very transparent with everything that I'm doing and, why I'm doing it. And I might overshare with my colleagues, especially the ones that, our teams will have an impact, if they have to work together. If we're doing sales and they're doing, support, or they're doing marketing, like, if the more you communicate, the better they know, like, in terms of, they understand where you're going, then they'll understand the motives behind why the actions you're taking, and so forth. And yeah, there's politics in every organization. And I think, you have to, in some ways, you have to stay above it. In other ways, when things are, and I've been in situations where the environments haven't been as positive, you really have to focus, on your team, your other executives, in terms of, supporting them, and then make sure that your team, the one, your direct reports and their teams are just focused on doing, what they do. You can only control what you can control. So you really, I work specifically on making sure that we're all aligned. We're doing what we need to do to achieve our objectives, and then, again, over communicate on the other side, and stay positive, because the last thing you need is, to be in a toxic environment that just spirals out of control. It's not fun for anyone.
And that's such an important message, that idea of positive. And it sounds to me like you brought that positivity, not only with your own team, but also with your colleagues. And I get the sense that you were probably one of the ones who reach out to others, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need to, right? And I mean, you spend so much of your life working. You have to try to enjoy the people you work with, right? And there's always, there's everybody's different, but I think you just, you need to just, try to enjoy yourself. You're in it. We're here all week long, probably overtime. We have to do X, Y, and Z. Let's do it and try to enjoy ourselves along the way. And it's business is serious. The consequences of failure are pretty significant. But I think you come to the table with enthusiasm to kind of get the job done, and just try to enjoy yourself along the way. I don't. It's not about creating, a happy, fun party place, but it's about, getting to know your coworkers, and understanding where they're coming from, and just to try to figure out how you're going to achieve, the overall objectives together, by doing what you need to do.
Sounds like a big emphasis on human connection.
It is, I think, whether you like it or not. It's
Making a
one of
good
the.
human connection versus, bad human connection.
Exactly, exactly. I think you're like, it's part of the game. You spend your whole life doing it. You want to do your job, and this is, we're talking outside of the sort of the technical aspects of your job. In terms of sales processes and strategy and so forth. It is the culture you build with your peers that will, kind of ripple down to your teams and to the employees, and you want to make that a positive experience.
And you know what I appreciate, Darren, of your philosophy? I mean, your enthusiasm is contagious. So first of all, I think that's wonderful. We need more of that in workplaces because sometimes I visit workplaces and I'm like, is this the place where fun forgot? People all have a long face, they're tripping over themselves, and it feels very heavy. And how can we do our best work when things feel so heavy, right? So it's bringing that. I'm a true believer. I mean, I've written about it in my book that fun is fuel. So when, we don't need to fabricate fun. Fun can be human connection, enjoying each other's presence, finding ways to get along and work well and have fun producing awesome work, and taking pride in excellence, really, having fun that way. So I think this message that you're giving is really important is because you're taking responsibility for it. Like I'm hearing you say, like I need to make sure that I'm reaching
Yes.
out to others and to communicate and make sure our teams align. So I think that's a really important message as well, is that taking accountability. When you're top leader, you need to take accountability for what's going on.
Yeah, and you're going to make mistakes, and things aren't going to go as planned, and things will happen. I think you need to embrace those, and that's where, maybe, I've succeeded the most, in terms of when there's been, a failure, or something happens. That's when you step up, and not that you would make light of anything bad, but I'll give you an example.
Mhm,
I started with an organization and they just finished an engagement survey and the scores were really low.
mhm.
And the executive team was shocked at it, and it was just like, but there's nowhere to go but up. Like they're honestly like we know how to change it. We know what we need to do. Our employees are telling us what they want, and it's simple. Like we should be doing. It's the fundamentals of building an engaged group. Let's start working on it. And when we do this in a year and a half, these numbers will be different, and we'll like I was already looking sort of the other side of the coin, saying well yeah, they're not good news, but let's roll up the sleeves and start doing what we need to do to change it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sense of empowerment rubs off onto others, right? And you're setting an example for your team too, because every single person in your organization has a role and a part to play in
Mhm.
contributing to the culture. For sure, the higher up you go, the more impact you have. It's everybody together. So by seeing somebody at the vice president level or director level taking accountability and responsibility for that, it really is an important thing to do. Now, and t tell us more a little bit about when there is a mistake or things go sideways or whatever. Like, how do you approach it? Like, what do you say to your team?
Well, it depends on the mistake, but I think you embrace it, right? I mean, if it's something you did personally or a bad decision you made, or things didn't work out the way you anticipated, own it and talk about it, and you will learn more from the failure, or not hitting the number, than you would if you did succeed, right? Because if you succeed, well, we did everything right, obviously, but when you actually look back and dig into those errors, learning opportunities, right? Like my kids playing sports, something bad happens, they learn more from a loss than they do a win, and in business do the same thing, and it's okay. And one of the biggest things I think that you do as a VP is when the directors falter in some way, it's bad, but you know what? Let's figure out how to not do it again, or how to work through it, or how do we support you to succeed next time doing the same thing? Because we didn't get into this position by constant failure. So we have some experience that's positive, and it's really just is working with them to succeed. And some of my best memories have been watching my teams succeed, or watching the groups achieve what they wanted to do, and that's priceless.
I love that. And there's nothing better than the comeback story, right?
Good comeback stories. Yeah, absolutely. And everything will change, right? Like this tool change is always there. You do something well, like we'll see how it goes next quarter, right?
Yeah.
So every day you've got to kind of pay the rent.
Yeah, that's great. So let's go back a little bit, to that first day when you became VP or the first little bit.
Yeah.
What was that like for you that you stepped into that role?
Oh, you know what? It wasn't that. It wasn't that big of a switch. It was a title change, and it was more people, talking, commenting on the title change. The actual role itself that I was doing, I was an executive director before that, didn't change that much. I think the biggest switch for me was going from an individual contributor to a manager. That
Mm,
was the biggest shift, because that's where the whole peer relationship changes and shifts, and the whole dynamic is sort of upturned. I think for from a director to a VP, my transition was seamless, and I think as you mentioned, the sort of the notion of politics and your team shifts, and I think that was sort of the biggest thing for me. And I mean, imposter syndrome constantly, no matter what, even as a parent, but exactly. So for this, it was really understanding, okay, this is my team, like these are the people I'm working with and supporting. So, and these are the folks who are going to be executing the strategy that we put in place, the transformation that we were going through, the objectives we needed to achieve, and we all had a part to play in it. And figuring out ways to support them was the biggest shift, and figuring out how they would help us, and myself and my teams do it.
mm. And how about in terms of, so that's was your experience.
Yes.
Uh, did you notice any differences in the way people were treating you, like how they perceived you?
Um, Yes, and this is not a humble brag, but it's just it doesn't like I'm still the person you spoke to 3 months ago. It's the same thing. And if you're a new employee at the organization, I'm nothing special. This is what I do, and you're part of the reason that why we're going to succeed. So let's just you talk to me if you need to.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because that's one of the things certainly that goes along with imposter syndrome. There's also that other piece, I call it suit syndrome. And you mentioned earlier when you go from individual contributor to manager, all of a sudden the people who were on your team and were colleagues are now reporting to you.
Yeah.
What was that like?
So that was the biggest. That was the biggest shift, and I think that's where your mentor, your VP, your coach. That's where that really comes into play, because it's different. When when you go from that individual to a team manager, it is a different thing. And I was lucky enough that I took amazing courses. There were good workshops. I believe in a lot of check-ins in terms of weekly one-on-ones and so forth. So it was a very open dialogue with my boss, and I was as open as I could be. I mean, I wasn't holding anything back in terms of if I was like, well, this is how I felt X, Y, and Z. And I was lucky enough to have. She was a great boss. I have somebody who really just said, well, here's, what do you think you should do? And then we'd workshop it through. And then, but it gave me the confidence to go back and make the changes, to myself that I needed to make. And it worked out well. Um, I think maybe some of the startup work that I did, where you were forced to, you were automatically a boss and you had to take control because there was no option, really, set me up for success. And I think for new leaders that are moving up the chain, I think you're never going to know everything 100%. You're always going to have to learn and evolve, and things change. Generations will change. Like I've been doing this since the mid '90s, and the generations that I work with today are very different. And you need to figure out, well, how do I relate? How do I connect with them? And how do I motivate them and engage them to achieve the objectives? So you have to keep learning and keep evolving. That's
Mm,
why I think self-help books are always and business books are always coming out.
And what are some, because you mentioned you had to make some shifts or changes like in your within yourself. Like what are some of the key ones that you shifts that you had to make?
So probably the biggest one the biggest one you have to automatically make, and the hardest one that I find when you're coaching directors, and that is that shift from it's not, them versus us. You are them now. So so like you are that team, and it's not, they told me that you have to do this. It's we want you to do this, and this is why, and here's what's in it for you, and X, Y, and Z. And I think just how you manage on a day-to-day basis is key to that in terms of the towing the company line, but living the values of the organization, explaining why you're doing or they need to do what they have to do. And I think if you're going through a big transformation, that's amped up times 10, in terms of, things are changing and here's why, and here's what's in it for you at the end of this, and this is why we're doing it. The more clarity and understanding they have in terms of what their roles and responsibilities are and how you're going to help them and support them will just make it a lot easier and faster.
And actually, if we stop here for a second, because I've had this conversation with other vice presidents or former vice presidents, and the challenge when you have to toe the corporate line and you don't necessarily agree with it. So how did you handle those kinds of situations?
Yeah, so you have those battles in the boardroom with your colleagues, right? And I think a good executive team don't always agree on direction. There will be some contention, and the not only amongst yourselves, but even amongst you and the CEO. And you have to be able to have those open discussions and battle it out. And then at the end of the day, you have to leave that room, locking arms. And one of the CEOs I worked with talked about that all the time. We can fight all day long. We leave here, we're one team. And you do that. And if you want to stay at the organization, if they're doing something counter to your values and stuff, then should you be in that organization? If they're just not approaching X, Y, and Z the way you anticipated, sometimes you might be wrong, and sometimes you have to just go and follow the process. I think you pick your battles, you fight the good fights, but you move forward as a team. And if that is a direction that you don't fully agree with, you explain why, you support it with data, you try to explain it, but at the end of the day, you're working together.
That's great advice. And I guess a lot of breathing through it.
Yeah, I think that's where I think that's where you need to pick your battles. And there's been some battles where I've lost, and my boss has come back saying, maybe we just wait till, if you believe it's not going to work, then try your best, and it'll be a lesson learned. And it's one of those things where it can't always be perfect, and it never really is.
And self-regulation is a big, huge part of it, I guess. Like the higher up you go, the more you've got to learn how to, manage the internal dialogue and breathing and all that.
Yeah, so I think if you talk to executives that I've worked, most people that I've worked in the past, I don't have a good poker face, and that's been my. It's sort of it's an instant tell for me. I could if things aren't going the way I think it is, you're going to know, but at least it sets the stage for a good discussion. So you don't have that, and I just I I'm okay with that. I've embraced that. I'm not going to try be different. I am who I am, and it's really I'll let the results, or the engagement survey or what have you speak for themselves.
And I hear you using the word embrace a lot. So it's probably one of your strategies, how to embrace. What other key strategies have you adopted to navigate all the pressures?
Yeah, there are a lot of pressures. I think you have a job to do. And you've gotten to this position because you obviously know how to do it, and if you were a director, you've proven that you can actually you can support people on doing it as well, and I think that just steps it up a notch. And I just have confidence in your abilities. You're probably way better than you think you are in terms of doing things. And over the last while, I've worked with a number of companies focused specifically on sales strategy and execution and managing teams, and the nitty gritty of driving a machine. And all of these organizations are very different, and the fundamentals are all the same. And if you come in there and you look at their process, you look for optimizations, you look for things, the best practices they should be doing, um, you know you, you will get the results you're looking for. And you just need to um, I think you need to look at the data. I think you need to look at the processes, and you just need to execute. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's like you have a significant toolbox, an experience. Like if you're at this position, use it and roll up your sleeves, and show your team how to succeed.
Well, I really appreciate what you're saying because, earlier you mentioned imposter syndrome, which is very rampant,
And
by
yeah,
like almost every leader I speak to has experienced some form of it at some stage in their career. So what I'm hearing is even though you might have imposter syndrome, know that you're there for a reason. You got to that position because you have the tools and the strategies, and sometimes you forget, so we get imposter syndrome,
yeah.
or it's just a natural way of being, and then just I almost feel like you're like, okay, now take a step back and look at all the tools you have and the strategies you've used, and use what's available to you to be able to succeed and kind of move through it, right?
Absolutely. And, yeah, I think so. Like you definitely have the ability. People always underestimate their abilities. Uh, level set, make sure you're in there. If there's gaps or your things you're unsure about, talk it out with anybody you need to in terms of making sure that, that you're covering all your bases. But yeah, have the confidence to go forward and, you know, uh, don't think of the, well, don't think of the worst things that can happen. Consider them as potential outcomes, but work through them, and you'll realize that most of them are, you know, are not going to happen, and you will be able to figure it out and execute.
That's a great mindset. Now, one of the strategies you mentioned earlier was mentoring. So
Yes.
and certainly that's something, I hear a lot is like, when I ask people what are your strategies for success, it's, I had a mentor. Like, can you explain a little bit more how, first of all, did the mentors come to you? Did you ask for mentorship? And now, as a senior leader, have you offered mentorship? Like, tell us a little bit more about that whole mentorship thing.
Yeah, early in my career, there was a couple of, there's a couple of folks where you were in a room with them and you realize, wow, that was a good talk, or that was a good, speech. And, you start to realize who you gravitate towards in terms of a leader. You read the Good to Great books and you start to realize, wow, I know some of those. Like I've been in the room with some people who are just great. And so I seek them out. Every time you see somebody do something, that's really good, you take a piece of it with you, right? You build onto your stuff. So I've had the luck of being surrounded by, really good leaders, also some terrible ones as well that you learn from, just as much. And yeah, I was lucky enough that, my direct boss was an amazing leader, and she really, you know built a team of directors around her to achieve an objective, and really helped us embrace the role and supported us to make the changes we needed to make to do what we needed to do. So super lucky. I'd encourage anybody, to just you have to network, you have to connect with other people, you're going to be exposed to them, and when you do find them, like talk to them and engage them, and tell them this is what you're doing, and this is, and ask them for advice. It's okay. And there are formal ways of doing it, there are informal ways. I have members in my network that I will go to for specific problems. Just go, this is what I'm doing, what do you think? And they'll give you these little snippets of advice that are gold. And so you have to make sure that you have that support around you. And it might be easier said or might harder than it sounds, but you should try to do it. And everybody's had amazing bosses. And why were they amazing? It wasn't because, hopefully, that they were easy and let you get away with whatever, but hopefully they're the ones that pushed you and forced you to grow in certain ways that maybe you didn't think you could.
When somebody can see your potential and then help you to push the envelope and explore the boundaries of that so you can get out of your comfort zone, I think is super key for sure. Now, what are you up to now, Darren?
So over the last year, I started my own consulting firm, and I'm working with a number of companies, wide range of companies, helping them with everything from mostly sales, and mostly it's about growth. So it's really about helping company grow their business. So whether they're in a rut, or they really want to take their organization to the next level, or they just want to level set to make sure, are we doing all the right things? Do we have the right processes? Are they optimized? Are we aligned with sort of the people, the process, and tools? So I've been helping companies do that, and it's been really rewarding because they're very different organizations, from like pre-rev to 100 million, in different industries, from manufacturing to high tech. So you really get a good, every day's an adventure, if you will. But the fundamentals are all there, and the owners want to do more, where they want to grow your business, and I help their teams do that, and it's been fun so far.
Oh, that's so good to hear. They're fortunate to have you. So, when you reflect on your career, the whole ensemble, if you will, and you think about what are some of the key lessons or strategies that work best for you, based on that reflection, what advice would you give 20-year-old Darren?
Yeah, don't don't take things so seriously. Uh, you know, I think don't rush the leadership path. Earn your way through it, grow your way through it, experience your way through it. Take the opportunities, be uh, continue to be vocal in terms of where you want your career to go, and really kind of you own it, so you have to drive it, right? Figure out what your gaps are, figure out what you need experience in and what you need exposure to, and leverage your managers, your mentors to get you that experience, and go for it, and do it. I think leadership's it's a gift, right? You have a big responsibility to, with these people. They have lives, and they have hopes and dreams, and they want to achieve things, and you want to help them, achieve that as well. So you really want to work with them, and it won't always be easy, and it won't always be hard. So you just have to
Mhm.
take one day at a time. So
Mm,
I would just, yeah, have patience.
love that. Darren, what is the best way for people to reach you?
Right, the best way to reach me is probably LinkedIn. So search up my name, and I'll be up there, and connect with me through that. I'm happy to have to speak to anybody.
Do you mind just spelling out your names in case so people can take note of it?
Yeah. So my name is Darren DeJean, Darren. Last name is Dejean, and my company is Revigence, Revigence, Revigence.com. Smart growth.
Wonderful. Any last words for our audiences?
Well, I hope I helped you out today. If there's any snippets of anything I said that you can put to use, that's a win for me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Darren.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.